Windsor Castle, supposedly fireproof and monitored day and night, should have been the last place for disaster. Yet on November 20th, 1992, flames tore through royal rooms and centuries of history, all in a space with no working appliances and every protection in place. Officials blamed a routine spotlight, but explanations kept shifting, raising disturbing questions. How did so many safeguards fail, and why do vital details remain hidden? The accepted story never fit the facts, and what you are about to hear changes everything you thought you knew about this royal catastrophe. Windsor Castle stands as the largest inhabited castle in the world, a fortress layered with centuries of security upgrades and modern fire prevention. By the early 1990s, its defences included a dedicated fire brigade stationed on site, with 6 full-time staff and a rotating team of up to 20. Dozens of hydrants circled the grounds, each mapped and tested, ready for instant use. Every corridor and stateroom was subject to routine firewatch patrols day and night, with strict logs tracking movement through sensitive areas. Access to private spaces like the Queen's Chapel required special badges, and even contractors faced background checks and sign-in procedures at every entry point. The castle's fireproofing program, launched after a series of heritage disasters in the 1970s and 1980s, brought new alarms, reinforced fire doors, and flame-retardant treatments for carpets and drapes. Engineers focused on containment, installing heavy doors designed to seal off wings at the first sign of smoke, and fitting detection panels that pinpointed the location of any alarm within seconds. Staff drilled for emergencies, rehearsing response plans that prioritize both human safety and the rescue of priceless art and artifacts. Even the infrastructure reflected this mindset. Electrical wiring was updated, with maintenance schedules logged and signed. Renovation work required advance notice and compliance with safety codes. In theory, a fire of any size should have triggered an immediate, coordinated response, limiting damage to a single room or corridor. The castle's guardians believed their systems could withstand anything short of outright sabotage. In a building where centuries of royal history were protected by layers of technology and human vigilance, the idea of a catastrophic fire, let alone one that could rage unchecked for hours, seemed almost unimaginable. Yet these very safeguards, so carefully constructed, would soon be called into question, and their failure would become one of the enduring mysteries of the Windsor Castle fire. Within hours of the Windsor Castle fire, the official explanation for its cause began to shift. Early statements to the press pointed to a faulty space heater, a claim that was quietly dropped after the first day. Attention then turned to the possibility of an electrical fault in the chapel wiring, but that too was retracted without detailed explanation. By the end of the week, investigators settled on a new cause. A halogen spotlight, left on after use, had supposedly pressed against a curtain and sparked the blaze. This version became the foundation for government briefings and the final report. Yet the technician responsible for the spotlight publicly denied that sequence. He insisted the lamp was not only switched off, but had been unplugged and moved away from the drapes before he left the chapel. His written statement, given to police and fire investigators, contradicted the timeline released to the public. No one in authority offered a clear rebuttal. Instead, the official narrative moved forward, rarely acknowledging the technician's account or the lack of direct evidence linking the lamp to the ignition point. Questions about the thoroughness of the investigation grew when the final report appeared. Spanning just a few pages, it offered little forensic detail, especially compared to inquiries into other heritage disasters. The document avoided technical analysis of ignition sources, failed to include a comprehensive timeline of witness movements, and glossed over discrepancies in staff logs. Its brief length stood out given the scale of destruction and the castle's significance. For many, the speed with which the investigation closed and the way its explanation changed in the first days left more questions than answers. The need for hard technical evidence rather than shifting theories became impossible to ignore. Automatic fire doors installed to seal off the castle's wings at the first sign of danger stayed open as smoke drifted through the corridors. In the Queen's private chapel and adjacent halls, detectors that should have triggered alarms remained silent. After the fire, Tests confirmed these sensors were in working order, yet during the critical first minutes no signal reached the control room. The hallway alarm system, designed to alert both staff and the resident fire brigade, failed to sound. Emergency protocols called for immediate lockdown and isolation of fire zones, but these safeguards never activated. Staff later described lights flickering and brief electrical surges in the hour before the blaze, but no maintenance logs captured any faults. The castle's electrical records for that morning show no scheduled work and no outages. These unexplained fluctuations were noted by several employees, yet the official investigation made no mention of them. Security at Windsor relied on a grid panel display mapping active alarms rather than comprehensive video surveillance. In 1992, closed-circuit television coverage was limited to a handful of entry points and was not integrated into fire monitoring. There are no logs or reports of camera outages in the affected zones, and no footage from the ignition area has ever surfaced. The absence of visual records from the most critical moments left investigators dependent on staff testimony and alarm panel data, both of which contained gaps. With doors left open, detectors silent, and alarms quiet, the fire spread across rooms and galleries unimpeded. The systems designed to halt disaster failed in tandem, allowing flames to move unchecked through some of the castle's most vulnerable spaces. In the aftermath, engineers tested the hardware and found it functional, deepening the mystery of why every safeguard faltered at once. These mechanical lapses created the conditions for a minor incident to escalate into a catastrophe, raising questions about whether the failures were accidental, overlooked, or something more deliberate. Early on the day of the Windsor Castle fire, several workers in the Queen's private chapel noticed something strange, a faint, acrid smell drifting through the air. One described it as burning dust, subtle but persistent, hours before any alarms or visible flames. The odour lingered, enough to draw quiet concern, but not enough to trigger a formal response. For these staff, the sense that something was wrong began well before the official timeline marked the start of the disaster. As the morning wore on, a decorator in a nearby corridor caught a glimpse of a blue flash near the chapel entrance. The light flickered for less than a second, sharp and unnatural, more like an electrical arc than anything associated with a slow-building fire. He mentioned it to a colleague who shrugged it off. Wiring in old buildings can be unpredictable. Yet in the aftermath, this fleeting detail stood out, repeatedly cited in interviews and internal notes. The blue flash did not fit the story of a lamp igniting a curtain. It suggested something deeper in the walls, something unseen. By the time smoke was visible, its source was already in dispute. Several witnesses claimed the first wisps curled not from the drapery, but from the roof space above the chapel. One restoration worker stationed in the gallery overhead reported seeing smoke seeping through cracks in the ceiling, followed by sudden heat radiating from stonework that should have been cold. Another staff member described a thin plume emerging from a sealed wall cavity, an area marked as solid on every architectural plan. He insisted the wall had no voids, no hidden passage, yet smoke poured from the join as if the fire had found a secret path. These accounts, drawn from transcripts and interviews, paint a picture at odds with the official sequence. The burning smell, the blue electrical flash, the first flames in the roof, and the mystery of smoke from sealed cavities all point to a crisis that began earlier and spread differently than the final report allowed. For those who witnessed these moments, the fire's origins remain tangled in contradiction, their testimony standing as a quiet challenge to the story told in public. Photographic records from the morning of the Windsor Castle fire are striking for their absences as much as their detail. Several royal photographers, each with official clearance, were on site preparing for an upcoming event. Yet across all the archives, not a single image captures the earliest phase, no photographs of the first smoke, the initial response, or the ignition point itself. The gap is not trivial. Between the moment staff first reported a burning smell and the release of the earliest published images, there is a blackout lasting between 6 and 10 minutes. In a setting where nearly every royal appearance and ceremony is documented, this missing interval stands out. The absence is not explained by chaos alone. Photographers later confirmed they were present and equipped, and at least one described being instructed to stand back as events unfolded. While some images were reportedly taken by staff or contractors in those first moments, these have never surfaced in public collections or official releases. Archive metadata from the Royal Collection Trust and press agencies lists no entries for the critical window, despite detailed logs before and after. Requests for these images under the Freedom of Information Act have yielded only partial responses, catalogue numbers without corresponding files, or references to images marked as withheld for security or privacy reasons. Documentation gaps extend beyond photographs. Official records released after the fire show entire pages removed or redacted, particularly those relating to the castle's electrical inspections, alarm system maintenance, and early incident logs. In several cases, the redactions are broad, whole sections blacked out with only the date and a file reference remaining. Maintenance reports for the weeks leading up to the fire are incomplete, with inspection certificates missing or replaced by summary statements. Structural vulnerability assessments, which might clarify how the fire moved so rapidly, are similarly fragmented. The combination of a photographic blackout and heavily redacted records has made it nearly impossible to reconstruct the fire's first minutes with certainty. For investigators and historians, these missing frames are not just technical oversights, they are barriers to understanding how one of Britain's most secure buildings suffered such a devastating loss. The unanswered question lingers: what evidence was captured, and why has it never been released? Long after the flames had been doused, the real puzzle lay within the castle's walls, quite literally. The Long Gallery, one of Windsor's grandest corridors, suffered some of the most severe damage. At the time, it was a construction zone. Contractors had finished for the morning, leaving tools unplugged and work areas tidy. Official records logged no flammable solvents, no open wiring, and no heat-producing equipment left behind. Yet when the fire surged into the gallery, it moved with a speed and unpredictability that stunned even veteran firefighters. A contractor who later helped with the restoration described a scene that defied logic. Flames did not just creep along the woodwork or crawl up drapes, they seemed to leap from one end of the gallery to the other, bypassing solid stone partitions. In some places, fire burst out of the floor or ceiling, igniting rooms that should have been protected by thick masonry. Firefighters battling the blaze reported pockets of intense heat trapped in sections of the gallery where fuel was scarce. Rooms separated by heavy walls would suddenly erupt in flames, as if the fire had found hidden shortcuts. The explanation came only after the debris was cleared. Surveyors discovered hollow voids behind the gallery's walls, spaces never marked on any official blueprint, old or new. These cavities ran the length of the gallery, connecting floors and bypassing fireproof barriers. Hot gases and smoke funneled through these unseen highways, building up pressure until they exploded into new rooms, carrying flames with them. Investigators confirmed that these voids were not part of the castle's documented design. Their existence had gone unnoticed for decades, concealed behind ornate panelling and stonework. Questions soon followed about the state of the gallery before the fire. At least one contractor claimed that equipment had been moved after the fire, raising concerns about whether critical clues were disturbed in the rush to clear the site. Still, the evidence of the voids was undeniable. The fire's rapid movement, its ability to jump floors, ignite stone-encased rooms, and outpace even the most prepared responders, was traced back to these hidden passages. In a castle built to withstand siege and disaster, it was the unknown spaces within that proved most dangerous. Inside the castle's administrative wing, the records custodian faced a growing stack of requests. Journalists, members of parliament, and private researchers all wanted the same thing: a clear, unbroken account of who was present, which systems were checked, and how decisions unfolded as disaster struck. But the paper trail ran thinner than anyone expected. Early drafts of the daily staff log listed a handful of maintenance workers and security officers in the affected wing. By the following week, amended versions showed new names, contractors who insisted they had been on site all along, and staff whose assignments shifted between drafts. One maintenance worker, rumoured to be inspecting faults in the chapel that morning, left no assignment sheet behind. His schedule for November 20th remains missing, with no explanation from palace administrators. The Queen's absence that Friday stood out. She was rarely away from Windsor on a weekday, and her official diary for that week remained sealed. Scheduled electrical inspections, already postponed twice, had not been rescheduled before the fire. The only fire drill that month took place 3 days before the blaze, out of step with the usual quarterly routine. In the days before the fire, a collection of valuable artworks was quietly moved from storage rooms near the ignition site to another wing, a decision that would later limit the losses. When the fire was finally extinguished, cleanup crews arrived within hours. Debris was cleared with unusual speed, and restoration architects began drafting new plans before the first full forensic review was complete. Later, when blueprints for the long gallery and adjoining rooms were compared, discrepancies surfaced, voids and passageways not shown on any pre-fire diagram, but now mapped in post-disaster surveys. Parliamentary debates over who would pay for the restoration quickly turned contentious. Detailed financial records from the period remained sealed under royal privilege, fueling speculation about motives and accountability. For the record's custodian, every missing sheet or redacted file became another unanswered question, one that would keep the true story of Windsor's darkest day just out of reach. Today, key files on Windsor Castle's fire remain sealed, and the official record still leaves core questions unanswered. In an age where transparency is demanded from even the most protected institutions, secrecy only deepens public doubt. Until facts replace omission, the line between accident and intent stays blurred. Sometimes history's most protected stories are also its most elusive. What do you believe happened behind those castle walls?